The XY Advisor podcast is intended for professional financial advisors. This content is created in partnership with our sponsor, Drummond Capital Partners Proprietary Limited, ABN 15622 660 182, AFSL number CAR 001 260050 of AFSL 334 906, and is limited to publicly available information. General advice may be provided by our sponsor, but does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. Before acting on any general advice, you should consider whether appropriate and obtain financial advice from a qualified financial advisor. XY Advisor does not hold an AFS license and does not provide any financial advice or services or endorse any general advice. If a PDS or IM exists, you should obtain a copy and review it thoroughly before making a decision.
Welcome to the XY Advisor podcast, a global community of financial advisors sharing and learning with one another to drive the positive evolution of financial advice. To get involved, go to xyadvisor.com or simply download the XY Advisor app.
Drummond Capital is an independent, institutional-grade investment manager passionate about supporting businesses with the implementation of managed accounts. While the growth in the sector has been significant, many businesses are not reaping the benefits. Understanding the journey and partnering with a truly independent business who is focused on achieving success for the advice practice is critical. Partnership is at the heart of what Drummond does, from investment management to client servicing and communications to business strategy support.
Hello and welcome to this topic series about the 12 steps to implementing managed accounts into an advice business. My name is Fraser Jack, and in this episode number 2 of 4, we cover steps 4, 5, and 6 in the change management process. In step 4, we discuss having a strong value proposition and also investment philosophy. In step 5, we think about what our clients really want. And in step 6, we lean into the perceived objections from the point of view of all stakeholders. There is plenty to discuss in these 3 topics, so strap yourself in and take some notes on this episode. Now, Simone, we're talking about step 4 right now when we're talking about the value proposition and investment philosophy. And this is obviously a massive decision when it comes to a business plan and setting these things out and working out, who do you want to be and what do you want to stand for. Talk to us a little bit about your process that you went through when you set up the business or when you're having ongoing conversations about what your value proposition is to your clients and how do you then, or how did you come up with your investment philosophy as well?
Yeah, sure. So we bring the best ideas to our clients. So we help to demystify complex issues. So we feel that we're acting as the head of a team of people that need to assist our clients to take action in all areas of their financial affairs. And they tend to neglect these areas because of lack of information or lack of time. So we put ourselves at the head of that team of people that bring the best solutions to the client. So our investment philosophy is really consistent with other service areas that we offer. For example, on the estate planning side, we create the estate plan, we document it, we highlight the issues and concerns, we flesh out the family tree, but we don't write the will. And it's very similar to what we do with our investment piece is where, put ourselves at the head of the asset allocation discussion, the risk profile, the goals, what we're planning for, but then we don't choose the underlying investments. So that's sort of quite that approach is quite consistent with all areas of advice that we look at for clients.
Yeah, okay. So that consistency, I think, is a really good thing as well. Clients see you that you're there to help provide them with the information on their journey and solve the problems. And as you said, demystify the complex issues. I love that term. Bring in the best ideas. As you were saying that, I was thinking of captain or coach of the team as you were talking. Yes. And so tell us then how do you explain your investment philosophy to them? Like you're saying that, you bring the good ideas, but what does the business philosophy mean, or the business's investment philosophy mean to the client, or how do you explain that to them?
Sure. So the first part of that for us is it's really important that each client goes through an education process and gains an understanding of, where they're coming from and also where we're coming from and some very important investment principles. And that's regardless of whether you're dealing with a very sophisticated, financially literate client or a client who's, in the very early phases of their sort of wealth journey and tend to be a little bit younger. So we've got a quite a highly structured process that takes clients through that conversation and that understanding. So we don't start with a managed account solution in mind. We might end with that. And that's really important for us in terms of delivering the right outcome to the client, and also making sure that the client file demonstrates a really sound compliance framework and that the advice is driven by the client with input from the advisor. So that process is the same for every client. And then the end solution, in terms of whether they're best suited to a MDA, an SMA or an industry fund, that is the outcome. So each discussion is different. But we do have a set process for that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So the process, depending on the client, I just want to go back to one step, the education process you mentioned. How do you go through that? Is that something that you sit down with them and you have just conversational, or is that something that you, I don't know, test them on a little bit? Or are you looking for certain things or topics that they might be, missing information on?
So it's quite structured, and I think COVID helped us in a lot of respects with this because we developed a slide pack of about 45 different slides. And what the advisor then does is tailor that. There's some mandatory ones that we all need to go through, but then the rest of them can be tailored to where the client's at that particular point in time. So it was important to us that we have a consistent message across all the Annex Wealth advisors. And so building that slide packet took us a lot of time, but we felt that it was important to make sure that the key messages are getting across. And then from there, we've developed a question set and we've integrated it into our risk profile questionnaire. So our risk profile questionnaire is sort of 6 pages long. There's a lot of space for free text for the advisor to write and then for the client to engage with that and add their comments, because we just feel that that's by asking questions, it's the only way we can extract information from our clients rather than just us downloading all this information via the slide pack. It needs to be a two-way communication.
Yeah, interesting. So, the question set then leads to what slides might need to be presented. And do you do that? Obviously, you probably wouldn't say we're going to do some education today. You would probably come in and say something like, we just wanted to run through some of the things that we talk about a lot and make sure that you can understand them. Or what's
definitely. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. The clients are positioned at the start that it's not a first meeting to SOA presentation process. We certainly are looking to take clients on that journey. So we may have 2 or 3 meetings before we actually get to the point of positioning the advice and the engagement with the client. So they are aware of that up front. And there's certainly room for reflection coming back and looking at that. And we felt that was really important. Looking at the FASEA standards as just one example is how do we document that clients are understanding what it is that we're doing and how we're going about it. So a bit of it came from that. We're already naturally doing some of that, but then when reflecting on the FASEA standards, we felt it was important to take it to the next level and be able to document the client's understanding in terms of what we're asking them, but importantly, what they're saying to us.
Yeah, and I guess that loops right back into the conversation around demystifying complex issues when you mentioned what you do as part of your value proposition. So,
yes.
Dave, thanks for joining me again. We are talking about value propositions and investment philosophies. Now, these often come out of history and experience and those sorts of things. And you've already mentioned that you went through a fairly traumatic experience at the beginning of your business career, starting at a peak and going straight into a GFC. Let's go into the investment philosophy and value proposition. How did you come up with that, and where have you landed on those things?
Yeah, so look, we started probably 5 years ago. We had some deep thoughts around what we thought was appropriate, but partnering with our MDA licensee and several consultants and a few trusted individuals in the professional advice space, we came up with an investment philosophy that really resonated with our clients, and we thought that could stand the test of time. So we've always been massive advocates of strategic asset allocation. I think everyone within the financial planning space is. One thing, though, we did want to have was something where there was a tactical overlay, right, where clients could, through the investment journey, have a process where they were risk on and risk off. So we built that into our mandates, and that's been a process that's been completely invaluable. And what we've found is clients are more willing, even when there is turmoil, especially around now and a couple of years ago, they're more likely to stick to the journey, which is the main objective.
Yeah, exactly right, and certainly stems out of the history of the business. Talk to me. In the last section, we talked around the idea of being able to articulate your investment flow or anything that you do clearly. And so, I think this is a big thing that advisors have worked on a lot lately: is how do they articulate what their value proposition is, and how do they articulate what their investment philosophy is. Talk us about that process for you and how you went through it and where you landed.
Yeah, so we created 3 components to our investment process, which was really robust strategic asset allocation. So getting the right modelling, the right data, and trying to map that out over a 10-year time frame. So put a lot of inputs into that whole process. And as we all understand, that's a big component that drives long-term returns and also risk as well. The other component is obviously the tactical overlay, so having a dynamic process that actually allows us to go outside the strategic asset allocation, not only to potentially cushion the downside, but also try to optimize the upside if possible. The other component is obviously manager selection. We use managed funds in our investment process. You can use direct holdings if that's what you prefer, but to our demographic, it's managed funds, and we obviously have a process around manager selection, and we've engaged an asset consultant that conducts all the manager visits and does that grunt work for us and gives us key recommendations as to who we should include into our investment program. So they're the 3 key components that we landed on, but importantly, that's clear. And that's something that we can articulate to every single one of our clients. And everything that we do in the investment process, all our communication, all our timely insights that are event-driven, we can communicate to our clients to say, this is what's ultimately happened to you in this environment. This is where we see things going. It's not a generic bit of communication. And it's something that the clients really value. And it filters out all the noise in the marketplace at the moment. A lot of people read stuff out there, but they can distinguish that what we're talking about is actually tailored to what is important to them. So that's a really important thing there. Each year, we obviously release our strategic asset allocation paper where we update our figures for the next 10 years. And that's a big white paper that our clients really get a lot out of, and it's something we can continually speak to. It also allows our clients to focus on their medium to long-term goals. They are in a particular investment program for a key reason. We've got a 10-year lens. Let's keep our eye on that objective. So all these things all communicate to each other, whereas in the past, we were very reactionary. The inflation piece, we brought this up this time last year. The growth to value transition, we implemented that roughly 9 months ago to 6 months ago. So all these things that we kind of bring up, we then implement, and the clients say, this is exactly what we spoke about. So this reactionary response just isn't existent at the moment.
Yeah, wow, that's fantastic. So obviously that required developing a little bit of collateral, around your North Star, around what it is you stand for. But then
Exactly.
Also, you just mentioned the SAA paper, which looks at a 10-year into the future.
Spot on. So it's something where we obviously try to see what the long-term return and risk expectations are across all our portfolios. So a lot of work with our team is put into that. The process is extremely scientific. It's not something where people just plop or pluck numbers out of nowhere. There's a whole range of simulations and inputs that go into that. There is also a bit of art to that process. It's not just purely science. Importantly, though, it's something where the work is done and we're really making informed investment decisions.
Yeah, well, it certainly shows your clients that you stand for something, and if you've got enough stuff on there, that most of it comes true at some point, doesn't it?
Well, that's right. And this is the other thing, right? We obviously track our decisions. The transparency of all this can be brutal, but I guess that transparency and that honesty with our clients is really appreciated. But the track record at the moment seems to be we're running at about 65% of decisions are good ones. So I will take those odds.
Hey, it's really interesting, isn't it? That you lean into the concept that not every decision is going to be right, and when it's not right, you turn around and you say, "Look, we this was as you mentioned earlier, best idea. It was a good idea at the time. It's probably not a good idea anymore, but." It's not something that you shy away from. You sort of lean into that concept and go, right, we did get a whole lot right, but of course we're never going to get it all right.
Exactly, spot on. And it's a humbling environment that we're in. So I think the best thing is to be upfront about it.
Mel, welcome back to the conversation. We are talking about the big chunky investment philosophy. We're talking about value propositions, and once we work out what the business is going to look like, we sort of need to start chunking down into what are we going to stand for? What is the value that we're going to provide to our clients, and what is our investment philosophy going to be? I'm sure you've seen or had these conversations a million times with advisors.
Yeah, absolutely. This step actually can sometimes end up quite large. It can end up quite small. I think different people are on different journeys of how documented and defined their investment philosophy is. I've walked into advisor practices who'll give me the handout of their value proposition and investment philosophy and say, we just want to replicate that with professional support, versus people who are, actually violently opposed to each other's opinion within the one practice. So it's really interesting. Yeah.
That's got to be tough, right? If a practice has completely different opinions.
They do. And especially the staff that work there, it's more challenging for them. But again, you've really got to tackle that head on and go, well, are we going to have two different investment philosophies within the firm? Or are we actually going to align? And you really need to know what this investment philosophy is. What do you believe? What do you stand for? And what do you want to give to your clients? What service do you want to provide them?
And on that investment philosophy, if somebody sort of is a little bit each way, what are your suggestions around that? Because you kind of need to have a strong belief, don't you?
Yeah, I think some people can be swayed. It's not the norm that I've seen. I think where you get more of the challenges in this space is people sometimes want someone to tell them what an ideal portfolio is, whether it's active, passive, whatever it is, whatever the philosophy is. However, they want to be able to add and change little bits here and there because they think something or want a bit of cuteness over here that they want to add in. It is rare that you have two completely opposing views within one firm, but we've had that. But you do need to firm up your philosophy, and you do need to work out what that client proposition looks like.
And like if you were sitting with somebody, if you sat down with a business, where do you start in that space?
Yeah, it's first question is, do you have a defined investment philosophy? And watch that conversation go from 5 minutes to an hour. And then actually asking for information sometimes about what their portfolio looks like, because I think sometimes people, and again, a lot of this process, you've got to be really honest with yourself. I can have an investment philosophy in my ideal kind of portfolios, etc. But every client looks wildly different because I've never kept to it because I keep changing my mind. And that's okay, but we just have to be, clear about that. So just sitting down and going like, what do your portfolios look like now? Do you have a defined investment philosophy? Basic questions, active, passive, your involvement levels, all those kind of things. Show me your SOA, what's in there? There's got to be something in these 100 pages we give out.
It certainly does. There's probably a lot in there.
Yeah.
one of the ideas around the investment philosophy that I like to lean into is the fact that it's a bias, right? It's a bias that the advisors, based on their experience, based on their beliefs, based on their values, based on fundamentals around looking at research and understanding how markets work and understanding what has typically done well in the past, although past performance.
Yep.
I think the idea that I find really embracing is that people lean into that bias and say to the clients, this is a bias I have based on my experience. I believe these things, not necessarily they are 100% true, but I believe in them.
Yeah, I would agree. But I would also say that, within the process of managed accounts and professional investment management, those beliefs can change. You don't have to be wed to a belief that you had. I think we often get wed to this belief we have and we're too scared to change it, but you can broaden what that view is, change it, add it, and mix it. So, with professional input, your investment philosophy and your beliefs might change a little bit. Your views of the world right now might change a little bit. You might not have previously thought markets were volatile enough to generate huge alpha in certain spaces. Now you might think they do, and that's okay.
Yeah, exactly right. And now, so the investment philosophy is one thing, but that we just sort of skipped over, and I'll come back to it, the value proposition side of this, and the value proposition around where do I add the most value to my client. It sort of is that concept of maybe my role is not as the investment advisor.
Yeah, but then what is your role? And what do the clients value? And then looking at, okay, because often it's really interesting because sometimes you'll go into a practice and, they're great because everyone's really open, it's really collaborative, but you're like, what is your value proposition? But then how much are you actually getting to do that? So a value proposition versus what they're actually doing can be really different as well. So the value proposition a lot of the time doesn't change too much because they're not doing it right now.
So why would that be? Is that because they just have too much else going on, or are they actually just maybe they don't believe in their value proposition, or they don't believe there's enough value in it?
I think capacity, systems, processes, tech, compulsion to change to get to there, and just knowing as well that it can be done or achieved better than they're doing it right now, but just not having the ability or the capacity and time to get to it.
Yeah. What are you seeing with when some great practices that you work with their value proposition, that they can clearly articulate what sort of value they bring to their clients?
Do you know what I mean? It's segmentation is one thing. So when I see a well-defined value proposition, they're clearly defining not what you give to the client, but what the client receives from you. So it's done in the client lens. So you will get X, Y, Z from me, or you will feel X, Y, Z from me. This is how I'm going to deliver it to you. These are your different options. So it's the client's view instead of the advisor's view. And then behind a good value proposition is very clearly defined, in my experience, is very clearly defined segmentation. There's not much scope creep between the segmentation, because that's how you can be. A lot of clients won't mind too much. If you say, I'm going to give you X, Y, Z, this is how much it is. You said you wanted blah, blah, blah. This is how I'm going to give it to you. That's fine. But as soon as you stop doing that, that's when you get the friction. But if you start creeping up in scope as well, you're taking from someone else. So you've got to have those really clear, defined segmentations and what the value is of each of those services. And then the only other tip I would say, value proposition, you got to be really unbiased in what you think the clients actually want. And that's challenging.
How do you mean by that?
So, I think you could ask probably, you would know best. Everyone I'm sure would say to you what the value proposition is around, clients want communication. They want easy to understand documents. What do they want? Everyone's probably got a very similar list of that. And that's not necessarily your value proposition.
No, I 100% agree. And I really love the way that you mentioned the client, putting it in the client words, making the client the hero of that journey. It's not about what you're giving, it's about what they're receiving and the perception of what they're receiving and what they value. So, I always say to people, ask your client, what was the benefit of that? What was the emotional benefit from uncertainty to certainty, from, what are the intangibles inside of that value proposition that you can put it. You can take them from, we're doing this, but we're taking a complex structure and we're turning it into simple terms, or that's that's what people value about us. It's not about what we're offering; it's about their interpretation of what they receive.
And are we making them feel more certain or less certain in the way we're interacting with them, right? I mean, I know I feel more uncertain about a situation when someone I deem as an expert is talking to me in a way I don't understand.
Yep. And you mentioned clearly defined, clearly defined role, clearly defined segmentation, which I think is great too, because it's, anything that, as we said before, anything that's sort of confusing is just really hard to make decisions.
Yeah, it's hard internally, and it's hard because it does, you give more to one client, and there's often a lot of practices who say the top end props up the lower end. And I just think that's thinking we really need to challenge.
Tom, welcome to this step 4 of our process or change management process. Talk to us a little bit about step 4. We're talking about investment philosophies and value propositions. I bet you've had many, many conversations with many people about what their investment philosophy could be. Tell us a little bit about those conversations.
It's interesting. I think there's probably a lack of understanding about what a true investment philosophy is potentially in the market. And I think, again, early stages of the managed account journey for a lot of people, there's a lot of consultants out there that deliver the value through trying to help an advice practice articulate what an investment philosophy is. But a philosophy is one thing and a holistic investment service is another. Some observations around the Australian market. I think there's been certainly a somewhat of a cult of value for a period of time due to some large sort of movie star fund managers that have potentially indoctrinated advisors. I'm not sure that the rest of it is necessarily grounded in their strong belief, but really what we're trying to achieve here is get clients and advisors to essentially refocus themselves back on, asset allocation. That's what we do as a business. We're asset allocation, experts and specialists. And really what we're trying to do is have, the client ultimately is trying to achieve long-term objectives, and it does so through a diversified portfolio that their advisor aligns with them. And if we get back to the basics that asset allocation is the primary driver of returns over the long term, then really it becomes less about, the nuance in the philosophy and whether that means you're low cost, passive versus active or value versus growth, or it really comes back to what is the best, growth portfolio or balanced portfolio I can build for my clients. But more broadly, a managed account as a service should enhance engagement. It's a transparent structure. I should be looking for, strong reporting, strong client engagement, and everything that comes with that service, not just, the investment outcome necessarily. And so really what we find is, unfortunately, a lot of advisors or advice practices have gone back to the beginning and are really trying to recreate a service from the ground up. And unfortunately, it takes a lot of time and a lot of resources to build a true investment philosophy and process and the systems that go with that. And then all of the regular reporting and insights around that. And so, unfortunately, there are different ways to do this, right? You can go to market and adopt somebody else's, and I think absolutely that's fine. And certainly the clients that work with us come along and say, well, you've really thought about this. You've thought about a way in which we can deliver the holistic service and actually want to adopt our philosophy so they can get back to, again, focusing on what they're good at and what their clients want in delivering the technical and ongoing service and advice.
Yeah, I find this is one that advisors struggle with a little bit because often can get down deep into the weeds when it comes to investment philosophy and get a bit too tactical in that scenario versus the higher level strategic idea of what that might be, and to have that, I guess, to start with that larger umbrella of what that the philosophy could be in a chunked up bigger picture view without getting too stuck into the weeds. Do you find that sort of there's a whole level hierarchy there of different where people just dive from one to the other?
Absolutely. I think, look, partly it comes back from it's a bit of confusion, like what is the investment philosophy? I think because of the traditional advice process has been driven around ultimately a sales process in a way. Like if you have an idea, whether that's to change a fund or an asset class, it's usually driven, you have to sell that idea to your clients to get them to adopt. And I think over time in Australia, a lot of the solutions have been provided by, traditional research houses, which are sort of bottom-up fund research houses. There's a cult of the movie star fund manager, and we've seen the downfall of one of the biggest ones of recently. And so advisors have sort of, in a way, their investment philosophy has been around picking the best manager and, really backing them and standing behind it. And I think, unfortunately, it's sort of the portfolio construction and the asset allocation piece has sort of been not forgotten, but it's been pushed to one side over time. And going back to managed accounts, if we do believe, as the research suggests, that asset allocation is the primary driver of returns, then actually getting away, the beauty of a managed account is it's a holistic portfolio, and we can get away from that sales process around we've got to buy the next movie star fund manager and get back to what are your long-term goals and objectives and what is the best portfolio to give you the best chance of achieving that. And I think that's really changed the game for a lot of our clients and means that they're away from that sales process, less focused on the line item, and getting their clients to essentially focus back on, the objectives and the outcomes of the portfolio. And that's really what's most important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And sometimes the philosophy does include some emotional aspects or some beliefs or some past experience, as we all have been through certain parts of the market ups and downs. So I think it's difficult to sometimes sit back and let your emotions to one side for a little bit and just look at the numbers and then work out what a good philosophy would be from a practical, logical point of view. Tom, thanks so much for coming on this particular point. We look forward to catching you when we dive into step 5.
Okay.
Simone, thanks for joining us again in step 5, where we're talking about the client and specifically what clients want out of an advice relationship. Tell us, what do your clients want?
Okay. We feel that clients want outcomes, so that they're obviously looking at the bottom line and what outcome that they are getting, but they also want the truth and transparency. So we believe that we provide that to them, but they want their advisor, we believe, to be focused on strategy and also focused on the relationship. So when it comes to what we can do for them, we believe that they're expecting us to do the research in terms of what is the best, as I mentioned before, the best ideas that are available. They have an expectation that we do the research around that and then bring to them what are the best outcomes available in the marketplace. So our clients are time poor and don't have the ability or the knowledge to do that for themselves. So they're expecting us to do that across all facets of the advice process.
That's really interesting. Now, I really like the idea of best ideas too. You mentioned that when we talked about value proposition, but best ideas doesn't mean best investment or best risk policy or it's best ideas. It's certainly, it sort of takes the pressure off a little bit, doesn't it?
It does, but that also changes over time. So I think speaking to other advisors around transitioning to managed accounts as an example, we can sometimes get bogged down in, but I can't go out with that story now because 5 years ago I told my client that, the multi-manager approach or this was the passive investing, that was the way to go. But I think clients are expecting us to evolve as things evolve. So as technology evolves, as products are innovated, they're expecting us to be really on top of that, as well as on top of the strategies and the changes and the government legislation. So I think that should just become a part of a normal conversation with the client, that here we are, again, there's a change, there's something that's happened, that's evolved, and let's talk about that and whether that might be suitable for you.
Yeah, but so best ideas based on current conditions, not some promise you made 6 years ago.
Yes, exactly right. And staying true to that and holding on to that is doing the wrong thing by the client, because, if we do that, it becomes almost an ego. For me, it becomes an ego thing that I need to attach myself to this because that's what I associated myself to that. So I think just removing that and understanding that things change and things happen, I think that's giving the client what they would expect.
Yeah, certainly leaning into that concept of we can't predict the future and sometimes the best ideas will be wrong.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, really
exactly.
good, really good. And as you mentioned before, relationship, is a huge part of this. Truth, transparency, and trust. So it really is that long term, as you mentioned earlier, that long term relationship that you're looking for. And I guess that's what you look. And if that's what you're looking for, you're finding clients that want that too.
Definitely, that's right.
Dave, thanks for joining us again. We're in the process of having a chat about what clients want or get out of a process. We've been through your process. You've got some pretty great collateral that you can talk to your clients about. But apart from that collateral, tell us what else your clients get or want out of their relationship with their advisor.
Yeah, so Obviously, the investment piece is being taken care of, and we can communicate that extremely well. If for whatever reason our client is off track, we've got actually the time to do the strategic things. And that's where we see advice really playing an important role. And obviously a lot of people see that as well. We spend more time on the strategic piece, doing things that we can make a real tangible benefit to our clients, whilst the investment piece is running in the background. Of course, the client really wants us to understand that and have a good grasp of that, and they want to feel connected to that. But the efficiencies, engaging the right professionals really does free up our time. We're spending less time doing things where we'll struggle to add value and focus on the areas where we can add value. So that's been really important for our clients, and we feel it is hard to quantify in a lot of, we operate in the dark arts a little bit. So it is trying to create tangible value to our clients can be difficult to articulate sometimes, but having greater conversations around what's important to them has really been a big part of, I guess, our continued success.
Yeah, exactly right. I love the idea of creating intangible value, more so than just tangible value. And I really like also what you said around our clients want a connection to something, and I think that connection is certainly done on a human to human, intangible level.
Yep, spot on.
Tell us a little bit about, you mentioned transparency. Do you ever get in conversations with clients around that, just want low fees or all those sorts of things?
We do. I think everyone does. So it's not for everyone. Let's be clear. So we do have solutions for someone that is extremely low or cost conscious. We do have solutions for that as well. And you can run managed accounts in a very low-cost environment if that's what you want to do. So that is something we are thinking about, potentially having a solution for that space. But in the meantime, we do advise on there's plenty of quality solutions out there for cost-effective portfolios. And if clients don't want to engage us in a more larger investment piece, then that's fine. So be it. In saying that, though, the beauty of the managed account space is that transparency. And when our asset consultant is able to negotiate a fee rebate, that does go back into their account. And they see that hit their account. So that they love that. And they know that when we are engaging a fund manager, we are trying to get the best possible outcome net of costs for them. So in our typical investment program that might have 15 or so to 20 managed funds, roughly 12 at the moment would have some kind of rebate negotiated with them. Part of our investment process is to include some index options as well. So we're not 100% purely active. We do adopt a bit of a core satellite approach as well.
Mel, thanks for joining me again. We are talking about the client experience and what clients really want. We sort of touched on this in the previous chat where we talked about the value proposition, but tell me what you're seeing in regards to when you speak to advisors about what their clients want from the relationship.
I think just in the last few years, I think advisors have ended up challenging themselves in a COVID time about what clients want. So I think this is really a very interesting space to be in the last 6 to 12 months, because I think this is changing. My experience has been advisors are breaking their own perceptions about what clients want. I think the ones that I'm seeing doing this really well are, instead of focusing on the medium or the delivery, the delivery method and what they're delivering, is kind of what we spoke about in the last episode, is how does that make the client feel? So does the client want on-demand updates on the market because they're feeling uncertain with the swings? Does the client want to keep a level of control with constant, portfolio updates, or the perception of constant updates? Like what are we trying to achieve with our client communication? And do they want you as an investment manager? Or do they want you managing and being the governance across all of their affairs?
Yeah, it's really interesting there because, when clients want communication, is there obviously asking them is the number one and working out for them what's good for them. But is there, can you over communicate to clients? Can you give them too much?
Yeah, I've seen firms there's actually an amazing firm I worked with, and the most incredible marketing and communication kind of framework set up, but almost just went a little bit too far that it almost became spam, right? And an amazing segmentation exercise for them was bringing it back, and they actually ended up with personalized phone calls as part of the segmentation, their internal segmentation offering. And it wasn't the client gets to call you twice a year. They had tasks to call the client. Just check in. Hi, how's everything going? This is what's been happening. Just hi. Like, what a nice touch. But I definitely think you can go too far. They brought the pendulum back really quickly and then added in some very personalized touches in there, wheeled back the high marketing, and that got amazing results as well.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? There's communication and regular and constant that you're going to turn up when you say you're going to turn up. But yeah, personalizing it has always been, I guess, personalizing things at scale has always been really tough.
Yeah, agree. And I think that's one of the, and we'll talk about it later, one of the benefits of managed accounts, right? And it's a collation of best ideas in a portfolio, and a best ideas portfolio for one person could be the same best ideas for another person. So the personalization touch, it's not as high touch as it used to be to provide professionalized service when you have that uniformity in other parts of your business.
Yep. And how important is, we mentioned technology before, how important is technology in that space of being able to look after clients?
I don't think you can do it without technology. Like I'm yet to see it done without a high adoption of technology and consistent adoption of technology. So, if you're going to adopt one process or system and one software, you got to fully adopt. There's no point being on two for the same thing. It's worse.
Yep. And is there anything that you've seen that advisors doing really well in that space of and getting in clients to really engage with their portfolios and really engage with their advice?
Yeah, there's so much work coming out recently for client engagement, front end, digital fact finding, and all of the client goal settings, client portals, beautiful things for the clients to interact with and for advisors to get that information in a very quick and in a way that feeds straight into their data systems. So for me, there's just no kind of excuse anymore for not having a process like that. The tech's there, it works, it's great. Can be scary to try and get into it, but that's our own biases. Again, it's very easy with amazing companies out there who will literally handhold you through the way.
Tom, we are chatting about step 5 in the change management process. We really are focusing on clients and what clients want. Tell us about your experience in this and what you think you've spoken to advisors about what clients really want out of their relationship with the advisor.
In the end, I don't think they're looking to you to pick the next, Facebook or Amazon or the next big winner. They want to trust you. They trust you. They want to get the information from you. They want the communication. They want the engagement. They want you to be there and help them sleep at night and not worry about their money. It's really that simple. And the advisor, client relationship is embedded in that trust. And so I think that in itself is really important to these considerations.
Yeah, now you mentioned obviously trust is a huge factor, and it can take time to build trust, but obviously once it's built, it can be a very, very strong emotion that people have with their relationship that they have with their advisor. You talk to the stats show that most clients or all clients trust their advisors. And obviously because the relationship has been built. Talk to me about that from you mentioned sort of communication being a big part of that. What sort of things are we talking about when it comes to communication with clients and in ongoing communication or regular communication, not just having the sort of once a year meeting?
Yeah, I think when we talk to our clients about adopting our service, at least in terms of investments, they're worried essentially that the client's going to think less essentially of them for outsourcing some of the investment, communication, if you will. And again, one of the powers of managed accounts is actually to enhance that communication. So the clients generally now have a nice app on their phone and they can see all the decisions and, the activity in real time. And so, we produce large amount of regular communication, and our clients in turn, sort of through our white label solution, will provide that to their clients. And what we're finding is they're having deeper, more richer conversations with their clients on an ongoing basis. Again, because it's coming back to that sort of holistic goal, the portfolio, the asset allocation, and how that's aligning with their long-term, objectives. And so helping the advisors to set the narrative and helping them to have more regular and consistent communications is actually enhancing the relationship. Nowadays, we live in the information age, and everyone expects to hear from their service providers on a more regular basis. Like having a quarterly review and then not hearing anything in between that quarterly review is no longer good enough. And particularly as we get towards engaging the next generation who are used, they want to receive weekly communications, not monthly communications. And so, one of the real powers of the managed account service and that your clients have got consistent portfolio outcomes means that you can actually provide more regular and consistent communication, alleviating the burden to need to go and do that yourself, but also fulfilling the need that, and the expectation, I guess, that everyone's got.
Yeah, I certainly think from an advisor sitting there thinking about how can they communicate regularly with their clients on this aspect, I'm certainly thinking there's plenty of opportunities for them to record something and send it out to all especially if I've got a lot of clients aligned in this space, but also I think a lot of that trust factor that you mentioned comes through in the belief that the advisor knows or understands everything as well, and the belief that the advisor is completely 100% on board with everything that's going on. And I guess that comes back from some of the previous conversations we had around value proposition. What are your thoughts around the advisors and their belief and trust in the process as well?
Again, this whole concept of building your own or partnering with somebody else, I think, is really important consideration on communication. If you want to start from scratch, develop your own investment philosophy, develop your own investment service, then ultimately you're going to be responsible for producing all of the communication. If the objective of building your own or having a managed account solution within your business is to gain the efficiency and have more time to spend with your clients or finding clients, then you're not really alleviating any burden for yourself. So when you are sitting back and assessing what is it that I'm trying to achieve from this, then look towards the partner that you're going towards, or in our case, outsourcing, and saying, actually, you've got a holistic end-to-end service that's got really deep, rich communication. That's actually going to give me the efficiency, but also the increased engagement that I want. And so I think when you are starting out on this journey and look towards where you're trying to get to, if the communication and service is really important, and I think it should be for all advisors to consider, then do you want to be responsible for producing all of that content yourself, or do you want to leverage the content that your investment partner can provide?
Yep. I guess one of the things when we talk about clients and trust, one of the big things that could harm that is anything to do with shock when it comes to expectations or fees or anything around that, anything around the, we were doing something and now it's something completely different, or it's more than they expected. Tell us a little bit about that, what your thoughts are around sort of that shock around fees or shock around expectations around.
Certainly, I think the way that the service is positioned is just an extension of what most have already been doing, but comes with additional features and benefits for the client. And so it's really around evolution, not revolution. That's the first thing we sort of say to advisors. You need to take your clients on a journey, but ultimately you still got the same process and you're really aligned to the same outcomes. You're just delivering it in a different structure. But fees, as we know, we live in Australia, and the industry super funds do a great job of keeping clients focused on fees. And certainly versus other markets in the world, there's a much stronger focus on fees. And the value chain has evolved. And really what we're seeing is the need to provide fee certainty. Advisors, we know, each year need to produce a fee disclosure statement for their clients, articulating all the fees and costs involved in delivering the advice to them. And so one of the things that should be considered and that we try and deliver on is, that fee certainty. So having some sort of fee budget or fee cap as part of the process means that next year when the FDS is produced, there's not nasty surprises, as you say, Fraser, and that they have that certainty. The other real ability is leveraging kind of institutional scale. An advisor at a single practice level is unable to go out in a lot of instances and negotiate en masse to achieve, institutional pricing. So again, partnering with groups such as us, where we can leverage our collective scale, we're able to go to market and get competitive fee deals, which benefits the client directly, and so providing that fee certainty and transparency plus the scale advantages is one of the real benefits of a managed account.
Now, Tom, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is obviously because you've been an advisor and you spend a lot of time having conversations, joint conversations, I guess, with advisors directly to clients. Do you think that's something that your history of being an advisor helps you being able to relate to that, what the clients are trying to get out of a conversation with an advisor?
Absolutely. I mean, I've sat in the chair and had the conversation directly with clients for many years, and also been involved on selecting funds and researching funds as part of that journey. And again, observations of the industry was that the sort of communication that fund managers provide to advisors often is it's late, it's in the rearview mirror, it's not very detailed, and it's not very transparent. And so we see our clients as partners and an extension of their business. And so, what we're trying to provide is that transparency, that support, and insights which are digestible not only to the advisor but to the end client. I think that's really important.
Simone, thanks for joining us to chat about step 6 in our change management process. We really are leaning into the concept here of there's always a what if, but how about this, or an objection, or what I tend to call a limiting belief in our mind somewhere. Mm-hmm. Whenever we make a decision, there's always some learned behaviour that we've learned from somewhere. We picked up something and we go, oh, yeah, but what about that? In adopting this process, or any process for that matter, whether it be the going to a new license or managed accounts, talk to us about some of the things that have come up with you, with the advisors you work with, any ideas around not so much objections, but things that popped up in conversation.
Yeah, sure. I think for us, control was an element of concern when adopting the managed account. When we moved from our previously run managed account, it was really important to us that we had control to hire and fire the portfolio manager. So we're not interested in a short-term relationship with the portfolio manager, and the portfolio manager that we've appointed is Drummond Capital, and we're looking forward to a really long and prosperous partnership with them. But it was really important for us to have that sense of control in that we can make that change if we want to. So when we started our own AFSL, we had the choice of being appointed as the operator of an MDA, and then you need to have an extra condition put into your license. So we had that choice to make. And then obviously we had a choice to make around appointing the portfolio manager. So we decided to not be the MDA operator. So we solved this by appointing an MDA operator, which is Philo Capital. So they provide the MDA licensing. So our initial concern over control complexity was solved by appointing an MDA operator who provides us with the licensing. So they also monitor the portfolio manager, collect fees, pay the portfolio manager, etc., and give us a lot of ongoing advice and support.
Yeah, interesting. So, in just on top of that, we'll probably get to a bit more of that later on in the conversation. But MDA operator, you also SMA is also something that you offer just for some clients. So, depending on the client, you'll choose which one.
Yes, definitely, and that certainly flows out of the question set that we have developed. So, where that client might be best suited is fleshed out through that process. So, we certainly not jumping to an MDA, but we have a full range of managed account offerings.
Yep. So control was a big one for you. Were there any others that you sort of thought might be the case? Obviously, you run your own license now, and a lot of that was taken into consideration when you as a responsible manager.
Yes, definitely. So the risk management was certainly a big part of it. We don't want advisors building their own portfolios because of the inherent risk associated with that. So that was a big part. From the advisor's perspective, there's always seems to be concern for advisors when they're putting in front of clients a more expensive solution. There's been a bit of a feeling that if I'm offering a more expensive solution, that somehow I can't do that, that's somehow written into legislation that clients are not permitted to go into more expensive products or investment services, and that's certainly not the case. So we had to do a bit of work at looking at that ourselves internally and just uncover what was behind that, where that concern was coming from. And a fair bit of it obviously was from the environments that we'd all been in before with the compliance regimes that we'd been part of. And just, we solve that by making sure that we have a customized, tailored experience for every client, and by making sure that that is clearly documented and articulated. So we push through that.
Yeah, so the focus on cost is obviously been a big part of a lot of marketing campaigns over a long period of time, and still gets consumers to think that cost is the be all and end all of investing. Does that mean that if somebody is of that, or clients are of that belief, then obviously you have solutions for that, as you mentioned earlier?
Yes, we do. Certainly we do. If that is the overriding factor, we do have solutions that suit that. But for us, it comes back to the transparency point, in that once you, I suppose, open up the box and clearly lay everything out item by item by item, it is that ability for the client to see that transparency. And when you do take that and compare it to their current solution or other solutions that are available, it actually becomes a lot clearer. But being able to break that down and understand it is a bit of a skill that advisors had to get comfortable with.
Yep. And sometimes when making decisions like this, or any decision in the business, there's often a lot of choices around, and the fear of making the wrong choice can often hold people back.
Yep, certainly.
So you got control, and you mentioned before that you getting rid of any contractual obligation to stay with that person and to have the idea of hire and fire. How important is that flexibility?
It's of utmost importance. As I was saying, we feel it's important from the client's perspective, but also just really important for us to be in control of our own business. We're not looking for sort of short-term outcomes. We want to partner with a portfolio manager for the long term, similar to the message that we give our clients. But just to have that control was vital.
Welcome back to the conversation, Dave.
Thank you.
Now, we are talking about objections and the concept of there's always a yeah, but moment. Whenever we hear of a new thing, there's always is it new? Is it why should I go there? There's always this little thing in the back of our brains that sort of triggers up something. When you were going through this process of transitioning your business across, what were your objections?
Yeah, why are we introducing this, right? And I think that's where the collateral is really important. And that's why we developed our document called the Portfolio Project. It really gave the context and the background as to why we were implementing this change. At the time, we didn't have any track record, right? So that was quite difficult at the time, but now we do, and it's clear as day as to why we're on this journey and why we're implementing what we're implementing. But at the time, we just had to give the context as to why we're going down this path. We didn't know a pandemic was coming, and we're just fortunate that we got in there before it all did.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, isn't it? Not that no track record. I guess it's always the sort of thing in the back of somebody's mind whenever when they're about to start something, because they have to turn up to their clients and say, this is our beliefs, this is what we believe in, and we're going to hang our logo on it or our brand on it. And yet if people say, show me the returns, you're like, we haven't got anything. So how did you get around that?
It was interesting. We actually had to provide some kind of pseudo-style portfolios just to kind of give a bit of an idea and the flavour of what we're trying to do. And a lot of the underlying investments that we were recommending had existing track records. So we were able to articulate that relatively clearly. And we did explain up front, we are building the track record, but part of our story was we wanted to introduce more transparency and more, I guess, a way of being able to understand whether our investment process was actually adding value to our clients. So we said that would be a journey and we would build that, but that was something that our clients would go on with us.
Yep. Now, at the time you were self-licensed, did you have any concerns around licensing and whether that was an issue for you guys at the time?
Yeah, so our license, we didn't have an MDA capability within our licensing. So what we did was engage a third-party MDA licensee. It's not just a licensee, though. I'll mention the name Philo Capital. They are genuine specialists in what they do. in terms of they track all the mandates. They give us updated reports. If anything was operating outside of it, they are onto it. All the transactions are implemented extremely efficiently and with a real process. So it wasn't just someone watching and ensuring that you got best interest duty at heart, but also someone that was a real expert in implementing these portfolios. So that was something I didn't quite understand as to what the role was at the start, but going through that now and seeing several stressed markets in that process, they are genuine experts in what they do.
Yep. And you mentioned the concept before around like if you start this, you once you start a new process, that's it. You might be locked in for a long period of time. What were your thoughts around that, and how did you feel around the concept of, say, being locked into managed accounts?
Yeah, so it was. Look, we did create it in a way where we do have flexibility. It's more the unwinding of a relationship that's hard. So, not to compare it to breaking up with a partner or something, but it's more that was part of the reason we loved the structure so much, is that if for whatever reason your asset consultant isn't delivering on what you expect, you can substitute them in with another consultant. So for businesses, that's the flexibility that I think a lot would appreciate. And it's something that we thought we really liked about the structure. So yes, there's an element of you're trying to find a partner, you're in it for the long term, but at the same time, you do have the flexibility to get out.
Mel, thanks for joining me again in this series. Now, we are talking about step 6 in the change management process for advisors when they're running through any sort of major implementation, including managed accounts, into their business. Now, one of the steps here, step 6, we talk about leaning into the concept of there's always going to be some sort of what ifs, objections. But what about this? I've got this thing in my back of my brain where it says I have to do this or I have to do that. Often, sometimes those things are limiting beliefs and they're not actually that true. But what have you seen around the space that where you get these sort of things holding people back?
Yeah, this is a great step. And when I first started working in the industry and we first started projects around managed accounts, we actually didn't address this. It was only in the last few years that we really lent in heavy into this space, because it was actually a real hurdle in the adoption. And people often didn't want to talk about their objections. So changing that narrative and being really on the front foot with them, saying, these are some of the objections that we get. Let's normalize that there are objections here and address them. And we used to do workshops with clients, around working through them. So it's not just there'll be objections from all levels within the business. Plus, what about the clients? What if the clients object? This is still a new value proposition that you've got to put in front of your clients. So I think, it's reasonable that you should play out what could their objections be? Make sure you've got answers for it. And that process is actually really good as well, because by doing this with someone, you end up building really strong beliefs yourself around these ideas.
Yeah, I think as you're talking, then I'm thinking that you definitely need to create that safe space, right? That right now we're just talking about this particular step. We're just talking about like what are all of the issues that people have with this? What's the pain? What are the perceived pains? Because often if you say to somebody, "What's the perceived pain that somebody else might feel?" and then you get the pain that they're feeling, right? It's easier to say, "Oh, somebody else might think that there is an issue with what if it costs more for the to provide the service, or what if it but that's the actual thing that they're thinking about, but they just want to say it as in a way." But I guess that safe space is an important.
I think it's really important, and to your point, perceived beliefs as well. So will my client now think, well, you used to do all that, what are you doing now? Or my client actually wants to make all the investment decisions. So for the client, but then also the advisor, I've picked these portfolios for the last 10 years. I've made these portfolios. I'm now introducing someone else. Isn't that my job? And what does that mean for my personal value proposition? So I think it's definitely something that you need to create a safe space about, but it is a vital step for this adoption in managed accounts. And the other thing I would say is that the players in this space in our industry are so good at helping and facilitating this step. And they've been doing it. They've been working with, national practices. And I'd really be keen to see advisors leaning in more to people in our industry, giving anyone a call, hit people up on LinkedIn. What do you think? How did you do this? Share the knowledge.
Yeah, getting over that belief or that objection or that idea, and that was a really interesting one that you mentioned here. Like if I was doing that in the past and now I'm outsourcing that does that devalue me, and that's a really interesting thing for people to wrap their heads around.
Absolutely, but that's how you're going to have to present this to the client, and you've got to do that. You've got to believe advisors get to the point that they're implementing a managed account because they fundamentally believe that this is the right thing for your client base. But why do you think that? Changes in technology and access to these managers is now available. If that was available 10 years ago, maybe we would have been doing it then, but it's only just available now. But these kind of conversations are really good for the practices and firms to be having before sitting in front of your clients, because you are only doing this because you believe it's the best thing for your client, but you're on the back foot a little bit. It's new. It's a bit scary. It's like, it's fine. Pitch practice together.
Yeah, exactly right. The whole practice together. Yeah. Everyone loves a good role play, but which we'll get to in a minute. But I do think this is a really essential step, right? It's a really important part of getting all those things out, understanding what the objections are, understanding what if they're perceived or real, understanding what the truth is around those. Like maybe there's actually a lot of evidence to be of the contrary or whatever it might be, and understanding other people's stories and being able to have that comfort and security and confidence to be able to move past this going, yep, doesn't matter what people throw at me now, I've got a good answer for it.
Yes. And it's, again, your beliefs. So you just have to, as long as you're believing it and saying it, that's fine. But yeah, it's forming your beliefs and working through the detail. It's a new offer. So spend the time working through the detail.
Yep, brilliant. That's it. Step 6, overcoming objections. Don't skip that step.
No.
Tom, in step 6 of the change management process, we are thinking about some of the objections that will often come up in adopting managed accounts. What have you seen in the space? Many
objections. It's a pretty daunting process when you're starting from the beginning. So there's many objections that advisors have. I think the first one, and often the largest one, is control. And advisors not wanting to give up control of the investment decision-making process. In the end, we say advisors are not giving up the ultimate control. Their job to sit there is to govern the process, to design the mandate, and to ensure its ongoing suitability for their client base. So ultimately, they are in control. It's just that in cases, particularly such as working with us, you are delegating day-to-day decision-making within those mandates. And once they understand that they can still deliver the perception of control to their clients, then ultimately that's all they're really looking for. And it's liberating to actually to let go.
Fantastic. Now, apart from control, because I want to get to control sort of in the next step, what about the idea around fees and, thinking that there are more layers of fees now to be included?
I think the value chain has evolved. That's probably one thing. So we know platform fees have come down a long way. There's obviously been pressure on advice fees, but there's also pressure on investment management fees. We're seeing, the fees for the underlying funds in the portfolios come down, and actually, through managed accounts, we're able to deliver scale advantages. So the aggregate fund that we manage as a business enables us to negotiate cheaper fees or institutional pricing for our clients, which are paid through to the end client in the form of a rebate. And we're actually seeing that percentage of the portfolio largely offset the investment management costs that we layer in there. And so in most instances with our clients, the total cost of the managed account portfolio is often less than the fully advised sort of portfolio that they're coming from. So the perception that it's more expensive is generally not true. It's often cheaper, which is, again, an additional benefit for the client.
Yeah, again, I love it when we come to objections, because we sort of have these limiting beliefs in our brain that go, that must be the thing that I've held on to for all this time, and then when somebody does the numbers and you come up and you go, oh well, okay, I need to rethink the way I'm thinking. Look, I want to also lean into the concept of the regulators and the concept around whether it can be seen as a product or can be seen as a service. And there's obviously lots of different things around with the regulators and where it sits in the space. Have you seen that as an objection?
It's certainly an objection, but I actually turn that on its head. I think that really practices should be considering, what the regulator would ask about the way in which they're currently delivering investment solutions to their clients. Like, is it really in the client's best interest to have a quite static, portfolio that's only rebalanced at the time at which the advisor, meets with the client? Is that really been the best interest? And then secondly, around equitable execution. So how is it, it's under the code of ethics now, the equitable execution, but how do you make a change within your client base? Do you start with your highest fee paying client or your lowest fee paying client? And so creating efficient structures to deliver, the same price at the same time to all of your clients is really the only way in which I think you could be doing meeting your, your ethical obligations. And so I'm sure there's certainly objections that ASIC will question the amount of work that you are putting into the investment process, but I don't think that's true at all. I think, in fact, you're doing more. There's more reporting. There's more insights. The governance role that you have as an advisor and in designing and overseeing the total process still absolutely exists, and you're just delivering it in a much more equitable and efficient way for all of your clients. So I would ask people to turn it on its head and think about what they're doing right now and whether the regulator would think that's a good thing.
Yes, exactly right. That everything that somebody's doing right now could be picked on in some particular way.
That's right.
That's the environment we're living in. Talk to us a little bit about what you think some people might be worried about, whether they are locked into a structure or can't change once they start this process.
Look, one of the many benefits of a managed account is the fact that the underlying assets are held in the client's name. And so I would say no one's locked in a structure. An individual client can walk off with the portfolio as it is today and sort of unlock themselves from the model portfolio that attracts at any time. And so, they're liquid, they're transparent, and they're in the end investor's name. So there's not, it's not a closed-end fund by any means. I think that's really important. Certainly as a business, there's a commitment around what you're doing, but you can absolutely change all of your partners. And I think the way, back to that sort of value chain consideration, adopting specialists within the value chain to help deliver the service for you means that is interchangeable. If you've got an independent responsible entity or managed account operator sitting across an investment manager and a different platform, there's various specialised parties in the process. If you're buying your investment management, your regulation, etc., or platform all from the same place, I would ask questions because that looks a little bit too locked up for me. But if you're buying specialised services from across the market, as part of that, it's easy to interchange them over time.
Yep. Thank you. And I guess probably the last objection that people have come up with is just around the concept of this, just so many decisions to make, so many choices, where to start, who to look to. There's just it's quite an overwhelming thing to start the process, which is what we've created this change management process piece to start with. But what are your thoughts around it being very overwhelming?
Certainly there's a lot to consider. And so I think understanding that there's multiple parties that are involved in this process, and it has been done before. If you're starting out on the journey today, looking at providers that have actually demonstrated the ability to deliver all of that for you over, in the end, and get to that sort of north of 80% conversion within clients, I think is really important. Looking for the resources that are available within your service providers, whether that's investment manager or asset consultant, whether that's within the platform, but you need support teams as an advice business that you can leverage, and having someone there with a dedicated sort of operational or practice management support that's going to assist you to go on the journey, because there's lots of different ways to tackle the project, and often again the advice practice needs to make sure that they're able to implement this without disrupting their ongoing advice activities.
Yes, and I think the thing about being overwhelmed is it stops you from making decisions, and this one certainly requires a lot of decisions to be made. So, Tom, thanks so much for catching up in this step. We look forward to chatting to you when we start talking about the next step, which is letting go of control.